while giving us some more inputs, sharing his insights into seeking pathways to a more secure and sustainable and resilient future, and also enumerating on the strategies and solutions to fortify our communities against economic shocks of disasters, is our keynote speaker now, Mr. Krishna S. Vatsa. It's an honor to have him here with us. He's a member of National Disaster Management Authority. He's a seasoned professional in the field of disaster management and has worked in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery for the last 25 years. Prior to joining as member NDMA, Shri Krishna Vatsa worked as policy advisor, disaster recovery, Bureau for Policy and Program Support, BPPS, UNDP in New York and Nairobi, and before that he served as the Regional Disaster Reduction Advisor, South and Southwest Asia in New Delhi, and before that he was in UNDP as Recovery Coordinator in the Philippines. In course of his illustrious career, he extensively consulted for several national and international organizations in the area of disaster risk reduction and recovery. Shri Krishna S. Vatsa, our keynote speaker of the day.
Very good morning. And thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's a great opportunity to share some of my perspectives on this issue of disaster risk financing. It is becoming an increasingly important issue. We recently had COVID-19, which affected all the countries fiscally. Most of the national economies and the global economy shrunk due to the impact of COVID-19 for 2-3 years. It was a big shock. All the governments struggled to manage the financial burden that the pandemic placed upon them. The second big challenge that all the countries are grappling right now is the climate change, which has increased the frequency of disasters and also placed enormous burden on the fiscal resources. I recently attended the COP28, which concluded in Dubai, and one of the most important outcomes of the COP was setting up of the loss and damage fund. You should know a little bit about the loss and damage fund. The countries have been asking for setting up the loss and damage fund for more than 3 decades. They have been suggesting that for most of the climate impacts that they are experiencing, their role is negligible. They are the passive recipients of the kind of impact that the emission has created. And therefore they should be compensated, they should be supported. In most of these countries which are fragile, which have tenuous resources, the fiscal base is so narrow that whenever there is a big disaster, the countries actually go deeper into indebtedness. If you look at the countries in Africa, the countries in the Caribbean, the countries in the Pacific Islands, all of them are facing very, very serious problems of indebtedness, and a lot of it could very much be attributed to the impact of climate. So all the countries have been asking for this fund to be set up, and after a lot of persuasion and arguments, this fund has now been set up. It is a historic development, and a lot depends upon how this fund is operationalized. That's a challenge that the countries would be I think global community would be dealing with. This fund would be set up within the World Bank. The World Bank would be hosting it, but yet the countries are very worried about the operational independence of the loss and damage fund. So these operational details are being worked out. So this is generally the one global response to the demand for resources. Along with this, there are many countries that have initiated other initiatives. Say Germany has been in the forefront of developing a global insurance initiative, which is called Insure Resilience Partnership. And Germany actually has supported several initiatives targeted at dissemination of insurance solutions. But whatever we do at the global level, it is very, very important that we have a good financial system for dealing with disasters and contingencies at the national level and at the state level and further at the district level. Unless we have a strong financial system for dealing with shocks and disasters and all kinds of contingencies, the countries would always have this problem of borrowing, and this would lead them into indebtedness. For many of you who would not be very familiar with this area, we also, whenever we had large scale disasters in India, right from Latur to Gujarat to tsunami, we went to the World Bank and we borrowed money. So it always created some kind of debt for us. So we need to find resources that make our system more sustainable, more resilient. So today, whatever I speak here is more about how we are moving in that direction. So it's about the overall system of DRR, disaster risk reduction, and how do we manage it financially. This system has evolved over years, since independence. It has been a history of 70 years, how the government had been providing allocations for disaster risk reduction or disaster risk management, and we have traveled a long way. And it's important to know this distance and the journey that we have undertaken. So my presentation is more about that, and then many of the issues that were discussed in the previous session, I will be addressing some of them as well. So, how do we go back? Okay, sorry. So, one is this, that our resilience is very much dependent upon how we are financing our disasters and meeting our contingent liabilities. And what it requires is that we must have a differentiated system of disaster finance. It should not be just, as people mentioned, it cannot be just one source. We have to have multiple sources and a well-defined structure of financing our disasters. And the experience of COVID-19 actually suggested that a very diversified system would really help us achieve the goals of resilience. So, diversified and dependable system of disaster. Whenever we have a disaster, we should have assured resources, and so that we are able to meet all kinds of demands. Now, these demands are also of various kinds, and we must understand it's not just about relief, it's also about recovery and reconstruction, it's also about preparedness, it's also about mitigation. So there is a wide range of demand that is placed upon disaster management system. Generally, we talk about relief, but relief is a very small story in the overall demand for the resources. So we need to meet the demands of the entire disaster management cycle. So there are 5 key principles of an effective disaster financing system. One, it should be built on a legal regulatory framework. It should have, somewhere we should have a law supporting this system. We must also assess the needs carefully. Say, for example, we have our losses, annual losses due to disasters ranging between $6 billion and $10 billion. That's the kind of benchmark that we have. So when we provide for the resources, we must be able to have that kind of money within the system to meet the demands. And it's not just the national resources, we should also be able to tap the international mechanisms. And then it's equally important is that how do we lay down the processes and mechanisms through which we disburse money to the people. No, it's not just about the money, it's more important how the money reaches the people. So our delivery systems, our targeting, that's also extremely important. So this is the first principle, that we must have a legal and formal framework. The second one is that it's a shared responsibility. It's not just the government providing the money, and within the government, it's not about just the national government, the state government, local governments, all of them need to pool resources. Then NGOs, private sector, civil society, insurance, banks, microfinance sector, philanthropy, crowdfunding, remittances, all of them come together. So it's a pooling of resources. The better we are at pooling of resources, the better we are at finding the adequate resources for dealing with disaster crisis. Third, we need to have very diversified financial mechanisms. So more diversified our financial system is, the better we are at risk management. Public provisioning, that's the most important, that's the foundational block. But the public provisioning should be supported by insurance and risk pools. We should have social protection programs, and we should also have private contributions from the corporate sector. So these are different ways in which various segments, various sectors contribute the resources, and an efficient financing system actually brings all these resources together efficiently. If the people contribute money, they are concerned about how their money would be utilized, and we should have a transparent system of receiving the money and utilizing the resources. So this is extremely important. Then, as I mentioned, we need to address the differentiated needs of disaster management. It's not just about one thing or the other. We also need to meet the life-saving assistance to the disaster-affected people, disaster preparedness measures, that need continuous investment. Post-disaster recovery and reconstruction is a huge commitment of resources, and we also need to invest in long-term mitigation. So the resources need to be targeted at all the different kinds of needs. And finally, we need to bring accountability and transparency. How do we spend the money? How do we utilize our resources? How do people get the resources as fast as possible? So quick and efficient, transparent mechanisms, very important. And also, as we know that the people who are most affected, they are not very influential in the system, so they should be able to get the assistance as efficiently, as speedily, as quickly as possible. So these are the 5 important principles. Now I come to how India's disaster risk system has evolved over the years. So we have a Disaster Management Act, and within the Disaster Management Act we have provision for disaster management funds. So we have 2-tiered fund allocation, one at the national level, one at the state level. At the national level, we have the National Disaster Response Fund and National Disaster Mitigation Fund. At the state level, again, we have the state level response fund and the state level mitigation fund. We also have the district level funds, which have not been activated yet, and maybe in course of time we will get them activated. Now, the system works in a way that whenever the states have predetermined allocations, but when the states fall short of resources, they come to the national government for reinforcement, for greater allocation. That's how, and then the states also tap other resources for securing funds. But what is very, very important is that we have a legal provision for disaster risk financing. What is also very important that this allocation for disaster risk financing is independent of the budgetary cycle, right from the beginning. We don't make provision for this in the budget. We allocate it through the Finance Commission right from the beginning. So the Finance Commission, which is a constitutionally mandated body for distribution of resources between the center and the state, it deliberates the needs of the state and allocates the resources for 5-year cycle. So I know that this current cycle is for 2021-2026. So which state would get how much in 24 and 25 and 26? That's predetermined, and they get these resources. So as a result, what happens that there is a predictability, there is consistency in the access to resources. So that's a very, very important point. It's not dependent upon political preferences. It's a very, very technical, technocratic exercise through which the states get the money. So it is independent of the political process, you can say that. So this is the kind of resources in the current cycle. That would give you a very good idea. At the state level, we have, for the 5 years, we have 160,000 crores, close to that. 80% of the resources go towards the response, and 20% resources go towards the mitigation. Within the response fund, we have 3 windows: response and relief window, recovery and reconstruction window, and preparedness and capacity building window. So we have a structure which addresses all the different kinds of needs, and this is, and within this we also have a state-wise allocation. So each state, how much they would get, it's very much laid down. Now, for the national level again, we have this 68,000 crores over a period of 5 years. We have again NDRF, National Disaster Response Fund, National Disaster Mitigation Fund, and again within the National Disaster Response Fund, we have 3 windows. So this is generally the structure of our disaster risk management fund at the national level and at the state level. At present, I would say that the states have adequate resources. I can say, based on whatever we have seen, states have adequate resources to meet the demands. And whenever they have a larger disaster, they come to the center. Recently, in case of Joshimath or Himachal Pradesh or Sikkim, they have come to the central government, and central government is assessing the damage and loss, and hopefully central government would allocate the resources as per the need. So this is a system that has really come into being recently. Earlier the money was only allocated for relief. We had only one window that was meant for relief. Now with this Finance Commission, 15th Finance Commission, the government has provided resources for recovery and reconstruction, preparedness and mitigation. So these are very, very big changes and developments that have taken place, that makes the disaster risk financing more differentiated and more, I would say, specialized. So that brings me to the final slide. We have the adequate financial resources. Our dependence upon international disaster assistance has gone down. India does not issue any appeal for international assistance. We are also not going to the World Bank as many times for taking loans whenever we are hit by a large scale disaster. So that's a very, very positive development. Mitigation, that was a continuous complaint that we are not investing in prevention, that we are not investing in risk reduction. So with a provision of close to $6 billion over a period of 5 years, the Government of India has tried to meet that need, that we need to invest continuously in flood risk reduction, earthquake risk reduction, cyclone risk reduction. So we have a specialized fund for the mitigation. That's very, again, a big development. As Ankurji mentioned, our protection gap is very, very high. It's about only 6 to 7% of our losses are met through insurance. And this is an area which requires significant amount of work, where there are some recommendations from the Finance Commission. This is an area which requires a significant public-private partnership. It requires setting up of risk pools. We are working with Munich Re, Swiss Re, all the other important stakeholders. We definitely want to make a breakthrough. It is a very difficult area. How do we improve the insurance coverage? It's not just because we are targeting the low-income groups. We are targeting the people who cannot be insured. So if you want to reach them through the insurance, we need to have a slightly different pathway, the pathway of social insurance as compared to the commercial insurance. So developing social insurance models is difficult, and this is what we are right now grappling with. What is very important that we need to set up large risk pools in the country. All the developed countries have set up big risk pools. They have used their tax proceeds to set up, US has been administering their flood risk insurance program for at least 50 years. So we need to set up large risk pools, and this is the direction in which we need to go. And this is what we are trying to do. Hopefully in another 5 to 10 years, I think we will be setting up large risk pools that will be supplementing our public provisioning. So we need to have our legally mandated, publicly financed disaster risk management fund. We need to have insurance pools. We also get a lot of money through the private contributions, and we need to have an efficient way of accessing and utilizing those resources. So this is how we need to manage our risks and disasters. I think the COVID-19 has given us a very important lesson that we need to be prepared for large scale shocks, and the country needs a big insurance shield to protect itself against larger shocks. And this is one area, this is the direction in which we need to travel. So thank you very much for your patient listening. And I will be happy to take any question.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Can I have a mic? So you sit down. Thanks a lot, sir, for your elaborated deliberation on this. We know that disaster preparedness and disaster capacity building is most important in preventing the human losses, especially during the golden hour. And for that, we need to prepare the community, we need to prepare the corporates, we need to prepare the district authorities. I have been associated with the corporates since last 15 years. and I see that a lot needs to be done in this regard. We have NIDM and we have a couple of other training institutions that build that capacity even for responders. Though we have NDRF and a couple of states have SDRF, but it takes a lot of time for the NDRF and SDRF to reach to the site of disaster, especially during the golden hour. What all are the plans of the government to build the capacity of, capacity of the state major corporation that deal with hazardous chemicals and hazardous processes, where there could be a disaster like Bhopal or any other disaster we know about, and how can all the training institutions in the country contribute in this aspect of building the awareness and the capacity and first response by the community? What is the plan, if you have any? I would like to understand that.
So we have in the recent period, we have expanded the NDRF capacity by setting up more battalions. But NDRF is a national level force and takes a little time for the deployment. It is very, very important that we should have a local level capacity. So we are investing upon all these states to set up SDRF. In the next 5 years, we would like all these states to set up their SDRF. So that's one thing. The second one is that SDRF should also be supplemented by the local level volunteers, which include home guards and civil defense. But we also need to have community volunteers. So recently we have launched a big program for the Apada Mitras, where we are training community volunteers. We want to expand that program. We want to include NCC cadets, ex-servicemen, all the various segments which can provide the kind of response as efficiently and as quickly as possible. What is very, very important is that in the next 5 to 10 years, we need to invest more in developing the local level capacity. It's not just about reaching the area, it's also, as you mentioned, it's also about developing the skills and capacities. Say, for example, we have very different kinds of disasters, the chemical disasters, which do not require so much the response force, but more as people of, who are skilled, who are competent, who are knowledgeable about the kind of response. So response also needs to be a little more differentiated than what it is right now. Right now it is more about deploying the force. But see, as the Silkyara incident brought out, how different kinds of skills are needed. We need machines, but we also need people. So in the next 5 to 10 years, that's what we are going to work at, developing more differentiated response capacity and building the local capacities. Thank you.
So I have a suggestion here, sir,
yes,
that NIDM is an institution that is basically building the capacity at the macro level. Why can't we have a couple of other training institutions?
Yes, we are developing the NDRF Academy, big academy for response training only at Nagpur, and we are going to replicate this in many states. So NIDM is not really meant for response. It's more about other aspects of disaster management. But there are other institutes that would be, taking care of this.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. It was wonderful interacting with you.
Thank you, sir. Well, in the wake of disasters like COVID pandemic and the disasters caused by climate change and other such exigencies, there has to be a diversified and dependable and effective system of disasters and the disaster risk financing. And NDMA is responsible at the national level, but it has to be a shared responsibility. The fund structure has evolved over the years, and dependence on international assistance and World Bank is almost negligible, and that's a matter of great pride for India. And on the international level, loss and damage fund is in the offing. That's also great news. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, so much for this wonderful keynote address. We